He was the kind of man who never sat still. Not because he was restless, not because he was anxious, but because sitting still felt dangerous to him. Like if he stopped moving, even for a second, something would catch up to him that he wasn't ready to face. He was 53 years old. He had a corner office on the 14th floor. He had a car that cost more than his parents' first house. He had a phone that rang so often, he stopped hearing it as noise and started hearing it as air. Just something that was always there, always demanding, always reminding him that he was needed, and being needed felt like the same thing as being alive. He hadn't taken a vacation in 6 years, not a real one. He had gone to places, beaches, hotels, mountains, but he had brought his laptop. He had brought his phone. He had sat by the water and answered emails while the sun went down. And when his wife said, "Can you just be here for 1 hour?" he had said, "I am here," and he had meant it, because he genuinely could not tell the difference anymore between being present and being available. That was the first thing nobody around him understood. He wasn't a bad man. He wasn't cold. He wasn't selfish in the way most people mean when they use that word. He loved his family. He loved his work. He loved the feeling of a problem solved, and a deal closed, and a team that trusted him. He had just quietly, without noticing, that had no room in it for him. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to stop for just a second, because I want to ask you something, and I need you to actually answer it. Not in your head where it is safe. Really answer it. When was the last time you actually chose your life? Not reacted to it, not managed it, not survived the week and called that living. When did you last look at a single day and say, "This is mine. I decided this. I built this on purpose"? Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you are still figuring that out. Because if you are exactly where this story needs you to be. The appointment was supposed to be routine. That is the word they use. Routine, as if the body is a machine with scheduled maintenance. As if you bring yourself in for an oil change and drive out feeling new. He had ignored the tiredness for almost a year. He was busy. Tired people are busy people. That is just the math of ambition, he told himself. He had ignored the weight he was losing without trying. He was stressed. Stress does that. He had ignored the way his mind went blank, sometimes in the middle of a sentence. Not often, just sometimes. Like a television that flickers once before the signal comes back. He had explanations for everything. He was very good at explanations. And then he sat in a chair across from a doctor he had only met twice before, and the doctor looked at his C-chart, and then looked at him, and did not look away fast enough. That is the moment he said he knew, not when the words came. Before the words, in the look. In the half-second for a man who spends his entire life explaining things to people decides how to begin. The doctor said, "I want to talk to you about what we found," he said. Even in that moment, his very first thought, was that he had a call at 3 o'clock that he could not miss. The diagnosis was aggressive. That was another word they used. Aggressive, as if the thing, growing inside him, had intentions. As if it had made a decision about his body the same way he made decisions about his business. Strategically, efficiently, without mercy. 18 months. That was the estimate, not a promise. Not a sentence, an estimate. But when a doctor says 18 months, the word estimate disappears immediately. All you hear is 18 months, and then you hear it again, and again. Silicco, halo. Like a sound that has decided to live in the walls of every room you will ever walk into for the rest of your life. He sat very still, which was unusual for him. The doctor was talking. He could hear the words, he just couldn't make them land anywhere useful. They floated around him like paper in the wind. Treatment options. Specialists. Timelines. Percentages. Second. Opinion. Clinical trials. All of it perfectly reasonable. All of it completely meaningless in this particular moment, in this particular chair, in this particular silence. And then, something strange happened. He laughed. Not a small laugh. Not the nervous, apologetic kind. A real laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere deep. The kind that surprises even the person it is coming out of. The doctor stopped talking. He looked at the doctor and he said, "Still laughing. Sorry. I am sorry. And then he stopped, because he didn't know how to finish that sentence. He didn't know what he was apologizing for. He didn't know why he was laughing. Only that somewhere in the space between the diagnosis and this moment, something in him had fracked open. And what came out wasn't tears. What came out was this strange, helpless, honest sound. Like a man who has been holding his breath for 20 years. And finally exhaled. He said, "I have a call at 3, the doctor said, very quietly. "You don't have to be anywhere right now." And he looked at the doctor and thought, when was the last time someone said that to me? He walked out of the building at 2:47 in the afternoon. The sun was out. It was an ordinary day for every single person on that street. Cars moving, people walking, a woman with a stroller, a man arguing quietly on his phone, a kid on a bicycle who weaved between two parked cars and disappeared around a corner. Happening, completely unaware of him, and his 18 months. He stood at his car, and he did not get in. He had driven to this appointment, the way he drove everywhere decently, on time, with the radio off so he could think about the next thing. He had fully intended to drive back to the office. He had a call at 3. He had a presentation at 4:30. He had dinner with a client that he didn't particularly like, but needed to keep happy. Because that is the kind of thing you do when you have built the kind of life he had built. He stood at his car, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he had absolutely no idea what to do next. And here is the part of this story that matters more than anything else I am going to tell you today. He didn't call his assistant. He didn't call his business partner. He didn't open his phone and scroll for the comfort of other people's noise. He didn't get in the car and drive to the office on autopilot, because that is what the next hour had always contained. He sat on the hood of his car in a hospital parking lot at 2:49 in the afternoon on an ordinary Tuesday, and he sat there. That was the decision. That was the strange, stubborn, seemingly small decision that changed everything. He sat there. He let the world move without him for a few minutes. He felt the metal of the car underneath him. He felt the air on his face. He heard sounds he never heard. A bird, an airplane, somebody's door opening 2 rows away. And slowly, like a man trying to remember a language he spoke as a child, he began to think. Not about the diagnosis. Not about the treatment options. Not about the 3 o'clock call, or the 4:30 presentation, or the client dinner. He thought, what do I actually want? And the terrifying thing, the thing that shook him harder than the 18 months ever did, was that he could not answer. He was 53 years old. He had built everything he had been told to build. He had ticked every box that the world told him represented a life well lived. And sitting on the hood of his car in a hospital parking lot, he realized that he had no idea. None what he would do tomorrow if nobody needed anything from him. He had confused being essential with being fulfilled. He had confused being busy with being alive. And the diagnosis, as brutal as it was, had done one thing that 20 years of ordinary life had never managed to do. It had made the noise stop. He did not go back to the office that day. He drove to a park he used to go to when he was in his 20s. Before the career, before the climb. Before he decided that free time was just wasted productivity. He sat on a bench. He watched ducks. He thought about his father, who had died at 61, still waiting to retire, so he could finally start enjoying his life. He thought about his son, who was 24 now, and called once a week and always got voicemail. He thought about his wife, who had stopped asking him to be present, and had quietly, sadly, made a separate peace with his absence. He sat on that bench for 2 hours. And somewhere in those 2 hours, something shifted, not dramatically. Not like a movie, no music, no revelation that arrived in perfect words. Just a slow, quiet turning, like a ship that has been going the wrong direction for a long time, and finally begins to change course. He was not going to fight the diagnosis. He was going to thank it. Now, I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, that is easy to say. That is a beautiful sentiment. But a man with 18 months and a family and a career cannot just decide to feel grateful for bad news. That is the kind of thing people say in speeches. It doesn't work in real life. And you are right. It doesn't work as a feeling. Gratitude, in the face of something this big, is not a feeling. It is a decision. A daily, deliberate, sometimes furious decision to look at the thing that broke you open and ask, what can come through this crack? He went home that night and he told his wife. He held her while she cried. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't manage it or minimize it or turn it into a problem with a solution. He just held her, and he realized, with his face in her hair, that this was the first time in years he had held her like he meant it. Not as comfort, as presence, as a man who was finally, completely, nowhere else. She felt it too. She pulled back and looked at him and said, he said, I don't know, but I am here now. In the weeks that followed, he made choices that confused the people around him. He resigned from 2 boards. He handed 3 of his biggest accounts to his team. He stopped taking calls after 6 in the evening. He started cooking dinner, not ordering it, not catering it, cooking it. Standing in his own kitchen with bad technique and too much garlic, and his wife, sitting on the counter talking to him, the way they used to talk when they had nothing and were somehow strangely. He called his son, not a text, a call, and when his son picked up, he said, "Chu do hear your voice. I don't need anything. What do you see?" And the silence on the other end of the phone lasted 3 full seconds before his son said, very quietly, 2 words, but the way they landed, heavy, warm, a little broken, told him everything about how long he's been waiting to say them. He started walking every morning, not for exercise, not to hit a step count, just to be outside in a body that, despite everything, still worked, still carried him, still let him feel the ground beneath him and the air in his chest and the simple, enormous fact of being vertical and awake in a world that had not asked for his opinion before deciding to be beautiful. He began to see things he had driven past for years without noticing. A mural on the side of a building, a bakery that smelled like something his mother used to make, an old man who sat on the same stoop every morning at the same time and nodded at people as they passed, which seemed like such an uncomplicated way to exist that it nearly broke his heart. He started writing, not reports, not emails, just things, thoughts. Me-mail, the names of people he wanted to call, questions he had never allowed himself to ask, pages and pages of a man meeting himself for the first time. He went back to treatment. He did not do it out of fear. He did it out of curiosity. He thought, let's see what this body can do. Let's find out what happens when you stop abandoning it and start living in it. He was not trying to survive. He was trying to live, and he discovered, with some shock, that those are 2 completely different things. 6 months passed, and this is where the story takes a turn that the doctor himself could not explain. He sat in the same chair, across from the same man. The chart between them looked different. The numbers looked different. The language the doctor was using was slower, more careful, like someone navigating territory they had not expected to enter. The doctor looked up. He said, "I have to be honest with you. I have been doing this for 22 years, and I am looking at these results, and I don't have a clean medical explanation for what I am seeing." The markers had changed, significantly. Not all of them. Not in a way anyone was willing to call a miracle, but enough. Enough for the doctor to use a word he used, rarely, carefully, and with visible disbelief. He said, respond. As in, your body is responding. As in, something is working. As in, the 18 months we discussed may need to be reconsidered. He did not tell many people about the phone call. He did not post about A. He did not stand up and announce that he had beaten something, or that attitude cures illness, or that he had found the secret. He doesn't believe it works that way, but he believes this. He believes it completely, in his bones, in a way that has nothing to do with data or studies or anything a doctor can measure. When he stopped living for the life he had built and started living for the life that was actually his, something in his body heard it, like it had been waiting, like every cell in him had been holding on, not to the diagnosis, but to the question of whether he was ever going to show up. And when he finally did, when he sat on the hood of that car in the parking lot and chose, for the first time in 20 years, to stop something in the dark, when he said machinery of a human being decided it wasn't done yet. I want to leave you with the question he asked himself on that bench, watching the ducks, in the long quiet of a Tuesday afternoon that changed his life. Not how much time do I have? That question doesn't belong to any of us. The question he asked was this: if I had 1 year to live I actually want to live, what would the first day look like? And then he looked up from the bench, and he thought, wait, why does it have to be the last year? Why can't it be this one? He is still here. Still walking in the mornings. Still cooking with bad technique and too much garlic. Still picking up the phone and calling instead of texting. His doctor checks in every 6 months. The results continue to be, in the doctor's own careful, bewildered language, surprising. Nobody knows exactly why, but those of us who know his story have a feeling. Not a scientific feeling, just a human one. A man stopped disappearing into his own life, and somehow, in the stopping, he started becoming it. This is the part of the video where I usually say subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment. But tonight I want to ask you something different. Don't subscribe because you like the content. Subscribe because something in this story made you uncomfortable. Because something landed somewhere in your chest that you didn't expect. Because some part of you recognized the man in that parking lot and realized, quietly, in the privacy of your own mind, that you know exactly what it feels like to be needed by everyone and chosen by no one, not even yourself. That is why this channel exists. Not to inspire you for 7 minutes and then disappear. To sit with you in the parking lot for as long as it takes. Drop a comment below. Tell me, what is the one thing in your life you've been too busy to choose? You don't have to explain it. You don't have to justify it. Just name it. Because naming it is how it begins. And next week, we go somewhere even deeper. The story I am bringing you wet. LL asked a question that I promise you have never heard framed this way before. A question that researchers spent decades and millions of dollars trying to answer. And when they finally did, nobody wanted to believe it. I'll see you then. Stay with yourself until I do.